everyone. My name is Christine Hong. I'm the director of the Center for Racial Justice at UC Santa Cruz. Welcome to the third and final day of the CRJ Summer Institute. I would like to thank our sponsors. We were supported by the Peggy and Jack Baskin Foundation, the Resource Center for Nonviolence, and Barrios Unidos. Thank you so very much, as well as really like all the organizations that are on the stage and organizations that took part in our events programming over the past couple of days. This Summer Institute is really dedicated toward our converging together like this and to consolidating our power potential, right? And this is an area in which, and I've mentioned this over the past couple of days, I've said that when, if it's ethnic studies, it comes with a struggle. And that was true half a century ago, it's true today, and it's true here. And this is also an area where the teaching workforce and the people who occupy positions of power within the school district are overwhelmingly white. And so you could say that in contrast to the student population of California, which is 80% students of color, that actually the people who administratively make the decisions are overwhelmingly white. And so there is a kind of minority control over education that doesn't serve the majority communities of color in the state. And we here too have had unique challenges in terms of this contemporary historical moment and the smearing, excuse me, the smearing of ethnic studies. And so rather than allow the school district to think. So in this moment when ethnic studies is expanding because of the passage of AB 101, this is the ethnic studies law that mandates the teaching of ethnic studies in K through 12 education. This was passed, it was signed into law by Newsom in 2021. By 2025, 2026, that academic year, all California high schools have to have an ethnic studies curriculum in place. They have to be offering ethnic studies courses. By 2029, 2030, that graduating class must have taken ethnic studies. So what are we witnessing in this historical moment? What we're witnessing in this historical moment is not only organizations that have come out and said no to ethnic studies, they've organized for the elimination of ethnic studies. We've also, and this is of a piece with other kinds of reactionary politics that we've seen across the state. And people say, okay, well, California is not Florida. But actually, the same people, for example, Chris Rufo, who is the education czar of Ron DeSantis, is part of an organization called FAIR. It's Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. And this is an organization that has focused to no small degree on California's ethnic studies curriculum. Who else is involved? Barry Weiss, the reporter from the New York Times who left that paper, and who has very staunch Zionist politics and has an investment in having control over what is included and excluded in the ethnic studies curriculum in California. And we know, as I've mentioned before, that when Newsom signed AB 101 into law, he put guardrails around ethnic studies, disallowing in essence, the teaching of any content that has to do with Palestine and the Palestinian liberation struggle, stating that that content was biased, bigoted, and discriminatory. And so this organization, FAIR, it's funded by Harlan Crow. Harlan Crow is the person who paid for Clarence Thomas to go on vacation. And so this is an organization, Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, that states that any teaching of the history of race and racism, much less community of color resistance, is racist. And they say that they are pro-human and anti-race, RACEIST. And so they have offered up an alternative ethnic studies curriculum. Organizations like Constructive Ethnic Studies have also offered up an alternative ethnic studies curriculum, but these alternative curricula are actually anti-ethnic studies interest groups that are presenting their anti-ethnic studies versions of ethnic studies curriculum as though they're the real thing. And so it seemed really imperative here in conversations that we've been having together that we needed to have an ethnic studies that didn't just sort of outsource ethnic studies content to beyond the local area. We have an obligation to study the conditions that have made Santa Cruz, broadly speaking regionally, an ideologically white site. We have an obligation to study that. And that should be part of our curriculum in schools. And with the praxis orientation of ethnic studies, to have students involved, not only in archiving the past histories of communities of color who have been here, but also to take part in and support contemporary struggles. And so, I wanted to introduce the people who will be speaking today, because what we really wanted to do was to have key organizers who have been working, moving, and shaking for a really long time in multi-generational ways to transform this area. And we wanted them to choose some documents and that reflect the struggles that their organization is dedicated to, and to give them an opportunity to teach those here, to include all of us in that, and to incorporate these into a people's archive of the greater Santa Cruz area. And ideally, this is only the starting point, we will continue to build together. And ideally, this will be that people's archive will be the basis of an ethnic studies social movements class that could be taught in K through 12 schools locally, in local colleges, and Cabrillo and CSU Monterey Bay and UC Santa Cruz, and also in community organizing spaces. And down the road with Jenny Kelly, who is here, Jenny has done an enormous amount of work. Jenny, would you mind standing? This is Jenny Kelly. Jenny is faculty at UC Santa Cruz. We want to not only have this be something that we study, but with Jenny's expertise in this area, and Jenny has worked on short-term political tourism in occupied Palestine. to be able to have walking tours here so that there is a kind of public curriculum that we can build out here as well. And so let me go ahead and let me say like one last thing, and then I'm going to go into introductions. We also recognize that the documentary record, the historical record, is an archive that is conditioned and shaped by structural violence. And that means that the struggle of workers of color, that they may appear in the historical record in criminalized fashion in their collision with the law, right? There's so many laws that were meant to curtail the organizing power of workers. And there's been a revolving door of migrant workers of color here. It might also mean that instead of there being a presence, there's an absence. There were many people who were what Ralph Ellison called birds of passage, right? Who were here, their labor was exploited, and they were never meant to, nor were they allowed to by custom or law, to put down roots here. So what kind of memorialization is there for birds of passage that didn't necessarily produce multiple generations of people who make up an infrastructure of power, right? For the most part, the names of streets, the names of buildings reflect a white power elite and reflect the kinds of the violence of racial capitalism. So part of this is thinking about what exists materially that we could look at and what kind of archive can we co-construct, but how do we also attend to and consider critically those absences, right? So that's a question for all of us. So thank you for bearing with me as I was speaking about this, but I wanted to introduce, and maybe I'll just do this rather than all in one fell swoop, I'd like to begin by introducing Santa Cruz Black. And so you can see in your program a kind of organizational biography of Santa Cruz Black, but I'd like to introduce two speakers who are here. They're co-founders of Santa Cruz Black. That's Cheryl Williams and Chris Davis. And Cheryl Williams is a long-time resident of Santa Cruz County. She's recently retired after a long career working for the Santa Cruz County administrative offices. And during that time, she was an active member of SEIU. She served on the union's board of directors in multiple roles. Prior to moving to Santa Cruz, Cheryl lived in the South End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. And for those of you who know anything about Boston, you know what that means. She attended Boston University, where she pursued her passion for biology, recognizing the importance of having the visual representation of having a Black woman in the role of scientist. Cheryl's social activism was sparked at the age of 13 when her mother gave her a really heavy book. It was 100 Years of Lynching by Ralph Ginsberg, which chronicled the lynching of 5,000 Black American men and 10 women through photographs, newspaper articles, and posters, largely through an archive of dominance. okay, an archive of barbarism, right? Um, Upon recognizing the atrocious books that were contained within and represented within this book, she chose instead to learn how the Black community pushed back rather than exclusively focus on their victimization. I'd also mention that Cheryl was part of the sort of outer ring of a radical Black feminist project that was based in Boston, the Combahee River Collective. Okay. Um, She's currently the executive director of Santa Cruz Black, and this is a Black-led grassroots organization that is dedicated to empowering the Black community across generations and intersectionalities. Her work focuses on housing affordability, wealth generation, mental wellness, as well as people's education around Santa Cruz's considerable Black history. This is a Black geography here. Her vision is to see a more inclusive community that's free of the stressors brought upon by racial injustice. I would like to introduce Chris Davis as well. He's a Midwesterner, also coming from a really consequential and heavy site, turned Californian. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, he moved to California to attend Stanford, where he studied linguistics. And he began his first experience in nonprofit development working at the Stanford Fund. He left California and worked in hospitality management in New York City and Miami Beach before returning to California. And he also worked in 2 startups where he garnered small business marketing and mobile app development experience before stepping foot in food service in San Jose. After moving to Santa Cruz County and meeting his partner, he's now one half of the really wonderful food business, My Mom's Mole, and he is a visionary co-founder and co-anchor of Santa Cruz Black. So, yeah, we'd like to hand it over to
Oh, there we go. All right. So thank you, Christine. Um, thank you for our introductions, which we wrote, but she did a great job. So what we had decided we wanted to do was give you a little snapshot of how we started. We are a grassroots organization, Santa Cruz Black Coalition for Justice and Racial Equity. And then we had the good fortune of working with a young man from young African American, a true African American. And we rebranded and called ourselves Santa Cruz Black. And I'm going to let Chris tell us what Black stands for the express purpose that I think my memory needs to be refragged every once in a while. So here, Chris.
So Black stands for Building Legacies of Access in Communities of Kinship. And earlier this year, we had a film series reflecting each of those themes. Partnering with Sylvia here at the Resource Center and the Capitola Library, we showed
Several films.
5 films. The first one was Who Streets, about the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, which I grew up 10 minutes from. Legacies was about the story of historically Black community, colleges and universities. Tell Them We Are Rising. Access was about the need to support the Black middle class against all odds. And Communities was about a land grab in Georgia, the taking of Harris Neck, which is still an ongoing fight. Kinship, the movie Descendant, about the the folks who descended from the last known slave ship the Clotilda.
So that was our latest adventure. How we started was based upon, we started, it was a march. We started in 2020. George Floyd was brutally murdered, and it was, everyone was affected, but we are 2% in this county. That is, the Black population in Santa Cruz County is 2% on any given census year, or less than. So we don't see each other often, and looking in the audience, there we are. Here we are. So, and I'm making that point. Oh, I didn't. Okay. Well, you have to also understand that I'm somewhat blind in my right eye. I do have to say that. I really do. It's sad, but it's the truth. Um, so, having said that, we're small in number, and that march was a way to become visible and to show our rage of what of the state-sponsored murders that were going on, and there were just 6 right after another. From those, from that march, and I'm not going to name names. There's some incredible community members who actually started it, and I jumped right in. I'll just say this: I promised myself not to look at any of the videos over the weekend. So on Tuesday, when I got back to work, I couldn't. Everyone was talking about it. I said, okay, I'm just going to have to go look and see what this is about. I was paralyzed and could not work. And so I put my phone, I was watching it on my phone, put my phone on the desk, and it was around 11. I was waiting for the 12 o'clock hour so I could just get the hell out and walk around and get my thoughts together. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? Luckily, Joy was thinking the same thing, and she sent out a text chat to a WhatsApp group called for Black, what is it, Black Girl Magic. I'm on that text thread. So I heard my phone vibrate. I flipped it over, and we started texting. And that was the beginning of the march. Shortly after the march, Joy found me, came to tell me that, okay, there's community meetings and we want Black leaders to be there. And I said, well, I have to be there. And she said, yeah, that's why I found you, because I wanted to invite you. And so that was the beginning of Santa Cruz Black. There were Black community members coming together, trying to figure out how we were going to organize and around around the state-sponsored murders of Black people, which hadn't happened here. Now, the then police chief, Andy Mills, was also wanting to be involved because he didn't want his city to go up in flames. And I'm not saying that's disparagingly about Andy Mills. He probably is one of the better police chiefs that Santa Cruz City has had. Yeah, I mean, he shocked me. He read some books that he read Kimberly Crenshaw's book, the one on intersectionality. I'm like, uh, yeah, he shocked me. So he, um, Okay, so that was an aside. Anyways, we had continued to have meetings, and eventually we became, by the end of, was it 2021? We actually formed a group, and we had different tenets at what we're going to do, what this, that, and the other. And now I'm going to give it back to Chris, because there was 3 of us kind of, we did our own thing, and we wrote for a grant.
So we were funded by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation's California Black Freedom Fund. We've been funded twice now through them. So that's been able to sustain the organization. We're now a 501c3. The Resource Center was our fiscal sponsor and really helped us get off the ground. So thank you, Sylvia.
Let's say one other thing. The other thing that I'd like to say that makes me proud when I think about Santa Cruz Black is that there's 58 counties in the state of California, everyone in the state of California could, every nonprofit, any organization that was fiscally sponsored could apply for that grant. Though they had about $10 million, apply for the California Black Freedom Fund, could apply for that granting, those resources. So there was two organizations in Santa Cruz County. We were one of them. And so I just wanted to say that because that was a big deal, because it was just the three of us, and it's new for me. It's new for me. Not the organizing, the applying for the grant, creating an organization. And the whole purpose of us coming together was that there is a need for Black people in Santa Cruz County to know that we have community, but there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know a lot. So we're at this point, we are trying to collect data, and we also know in order to keep us here, because Santa Cruz County is intentionally exclusive, homogenous, i.e. white. And so we are looking for ways in which we can, well, let me say it this way. In order for the Black people to thrive here, we have to be able to live here. And we need to have homes. So there's two ways to live. You have to have a decent salary so you can afford to rent and or buy, or the housing has to be affordable. But the deal with the salary part, that's the economic justice, that's a bigger fight and more protracted. Affordable housing is, or a reparations-based affordable housing is something, or even collective type of housing is more feasible. It's still protractive, but it's still more feasible. And Chris, do you want to talk about what our next phase is? We have this one.
To talk about it. Okay.
No, you're going to talk about it.
Okay.
Yes.
So as far as like People's Archive, the project that we're going to work on is examining the restrictive covenants and housing deeds throughout the county. AB 1466 was passed 3 years ago. Removing all of the racially restrictive language from deeds, requiring it to be removed. And so there's a whole process. And so we're working with UCSC to get a sample of the deeds, to see. It's on the county, is it the county council or the recorder?
The recorder's office
is required to identify the language in the deeds that is, now illegal. So that's a project that we've just begun. So that will be our contribution to one of our contributions to the People's Archive.
Oh, I think it was 2022. We did a public launch. It was well received. It was right here in the Resource Center for Nonviolence. Again, thank you. We had our home here until our funds got smaller. So having said that, it was a big smash, and all we had was social media. I could not believe how many people came through. So I had to start asking people, how did you find out about it? Instagram. I'm like, oh, it works. I was like, no, that's what's going to work. I'm thinking, no, it's not going to work. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And it did. So that was incredible. We used a photograph of Ketanji Brown Jackson for the express purpose. We were celebrating her ascension to the Supreme Court for the how many years? The first Black woman ever. Exactly, ever. So we used the photograph, which we thought was common commons. Now, when you're using photographs in this credits, you have to get permission, just like when you're using, screen a film, you have to get permission to screen it, and you have to get permission to use it, and there's a fee associated with that. Well, I didn't know that because I was going through trying not to become blind. Didn't work. Um, but someone else did that. And long story short, 2 years later, Associate Press, it was Associate Press Photograph, they're contacting us, telling us that we owe them X amount of dollars for a photo that clearly had a, it's not the same photo, but it is her beautiful face. But it's not the same photo because it's like a filter over it that kind of grays it out. So we have, um, thank you, Chris, because I told the attorney, you mean to tell me you're going to charge us, a small nonprofit with low funds, you're going to take us to court when there's no damages, we're not making any money. Well, it says on your website that you can. I said, yes, we're a nonprofit. We do solicit for donations. If people choose to donate, we will accept it, but we didn't charge anything. And so your client is not losing anything. And I'm so sure your client has made lots of money off of the first Black woman justice. And and so Chris says to me, I think, with his very authoritative voice, I think this conversation is over. Luckily, I stopped my argument because I'm thinking I'm going to get in hot water here. And it's not really a legal argument, but it was ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. I don't know what else thinks, but I definitely think it's ridiculous. You're going to charge us money when we're not, we're just celebrating her ascension. We're not trying to make money off of you or her, for that matter. So,
Should I play the clip? You want to talk about that before I?
okay, we are going to play this. Okay, play this clip of Sabah Falayan, who is the director of Whose Streets, and it so happens that we talked about our work as a continuation of the civil rights activism, and here we go.
You know, as we see with all the different cases of police violence nationwide, this continues to be an ongoing struggle. It continues to be an interconnected struggle. And it, you know, it's almost like, I think we were a bit idealistic, but we were saying, "Oh, this ain't your, you know, this ain't our grandma's civil rights." Like it is, you know, it is.
Okay, now it's on. We're just struggling and fighting the same battles. Now it's banned books. There's still Black women authors. Those books are being banned. Intersectionality is on the cutting block, so to speak. Um, Voting rights. What else? It's the same issues for the most part. So it is a continuum, and it's also Black mothers' sons who are being, well, now Black mothers' children who are being murdered indiscriminately for no reason and no accountability or very little accountability. So it's the same issues that happened that when we rose up in the 50s. Same issues. And so it is a continuation, even though people say, oh no, we're going at it differently, but it's the same issues. And that's the point.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I ask that you reserve your questions for Chris and Cheryl until the end, but some of the other presentations will be more interactive. And so, again, this is a kind of ongoing project. And, you know, they've laid out doing something around restrictive covenants. And this is work, if you have expertise, if you have any kind of capacity to contribute to this project, we are speaking right now about co-constructing a people's archive out of which we build an ethnic studies, social movements curriculum. So please, organize with us. And I also wanted to mention that, Santa Cruz was one of the landing sites of the Great Migration. And there were many agricultural workers who were fleeing the Jim Crow South. They didn't just go to New York, Chicago, Detroit. They also came out west and came to Santa Cruz. And I knew people when I was living in Oakland whose grandparents had been working the fields in Santa Cruz. But again, there's a kind of localized infrastructure here that multi generationally reproduces along racially restrictive lines. But the people who labor and toil and work in the fields, oftentimes that has literally been a revolving door. So, how do we understand Santa Cruz's Black geography? How do we start to materialize those histories? And part of that is having a multi sided discussion that connects us to a place like Oakland, right? And there's also a legacy in the 60s of Black radical organizing here that's partly anchored in the university, but not entirely. And so there are those legacies here. And there's also a history of the fact that Ida B. Wells lived here for a spell. And her sister went to Santa Cruz High. I mean, so there is a legacy here beyond the very sort of slender attention that Black history receives. So I'd like to introduce next, and I'd like to introduce, just a moment, Roy Recio, who is a native of we're going somewhat out of our sort of sequence, but who is a native of Watsonville and is the son and the grandson of early Manong. Recio's extensive network in the Filipino community, and it is very exhaustive, comes by way of his 20 years of experience as a community advocate in the San Francisco Bay Area. He has worked and collaborated with organizations such as the Manila Town Heritage Foundation, the Bayanihan Center, the iHotel, and the SEIU USWW, the Baggage Handlers Union at SF International Airport. He founded a project that really serves as a model for us, the Tobera Project, a grassroots community organization that is working to raise the stories of migrant Filipinos of the Central Coast and of Fermín Tobera, the farm worker who was brutally murdered in the 1930s Watsonville riots. He serves as the Watsonville is in the Heart community leader and advisor, and I will be I will go ahead and I'll move the PowerPoint. But Roy, please take it away.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. All right. So my name is Roy Recio. I'm a third generation Filipino American born and raised on the Beach Road labor camp in Watsonville. I went to Amesti, Rolling Hills, and 1986 graduate of Watsonville High School. I'm a third generation, as I said. My grandfather married a Dust Bowl settler, a white lady from Oklahoma, and since my grandfather was a Filipino, they couldn't marry in California due to anti-miscegenation laws. So thusly, they had to take this thing called the Honeymoon Express to New Mexico to get married legally, basically. So even though they were a couple and in love and such, back in that day, the 30s and before World War II, they just couldn't get married. Filipinos came here largely to work the agricultural fields of the Central Coast, up and down the coast, El Centro, Stockton, Delano, Isleton, Salinas, and such. But a lot of them settled in Watsonville, which is my part of the family. So getting back to my mother's side, she was half Filipino and half white. And when my grandparents did shopping or had to go into town, they couldn't walk together. She had to walk 10 paces behind him, and thusly, she'd be subject to, racial epitaphs and such. So therefore, they had to live kind of like a quiet life per se, and it was quite difficult, particularly during the Dust Bowl era and the Great Depression, where jobs were hard to come by and people had to do what they could. Filipinos did the work that the white man didn't want to do, and that was arduous, backbreaking labor in the fields, working, strawberries, apples, um, Brussels sprouts, lettuce, spinach, garlic, everything you could imagine. So they worked 10 hours a day, and because they were men, young men coming to America, the government only allowed men to come. So the ratio of men to women was 30 Filipino men to 1 Filipino woman. Thusly, as a young man, you want to go out and mingle, sparkle, show your wares and meet the ladies, but there were none to be had. And thusly, when white women saw that Filipinos had a little bit of money in their pocket, they were quite dapper. They wanted to, have fun, just as any 20-year-old would want to do. So there was a Palm Beach taxi dance hall that allowed a social box for Filipino men to pay a dime a dance, basically, with white women in town. So this is kind of getting popular, where the white men kind of felt, hey, what the hell's going on? Our women, our girls, whoever, they're dancing with these brown, quote unquote, monkeys. What the hell is going on with all that? So that sparked a lot of racial unrest and tension in the community. And it exploded in January of 1930, where there was a 5-day race riot in Watsonville. Now, this history is not really documented so well, particularly in education, as far as public schools, Cabrillo, UC Santa Cruz. And although we are the descendants of the Manong generation, we know it all too well. That whole episode in history is pretty much neglected or squashed by the dominant society, who don't want to talk about any tension, racial unrest or strife, basically. But indeed, this is the truth. The biggest advocate, I guess, historically we have is Sandy Leiden at Cabrillo College. And since I'm a fellow Seahawk, I know that history all too well through Sandy, who's really like 90 years old now, but he's still a great advocate and scholar and historian of local history, particularly in the Asian community. So Filipinos followed the Chinese and the Japanese to Watsonville, and thusly we faced a lot of discrimination and prejudice, just like housing. Martinelli's is a big apple producer, but back in that day, they didn't want little brown brothers or little yellow brothers living in Martinelli's district or Martinelli's area on California Street and such. So even that culminated too when World War II happened. Filipinos and Japanese joined the cause. Japanese Americans who didn't get interned, they joined the cause, i.e. the 442nd of the Japanese Airborne Squad, along with the Tuskegee folks. Filipinos also joined that cause too. They volunteered straight out of the fields, even though they felt inferior, I'd say, after the race riots, and they just wanted to help out the American country survive and persevere during wartime. So they were recruited and volunteered out of the fields to work and train in Fort Ord. Now they fought in the Pacific Theater, and also, were dignified with valor and glory and such. But when they came back to America after the war, came back home to the Salinas Valley, the Paro Valley, and so on, they were not recognized as true war heroes. They were basically back to the fields. Some of the veteranos also, they got some benefits, I guess. They were able to have barbershops and establish small businesses and such in Lower Main area, where that area of Watsonville, Lower Main, was considered the squalor of the city. The city governments didn't want to have any, impetus to try and build something there or generate proper housing or proper, attention. Basically, that area was considered Lower Main, the squalor of Watsonville. So when I grew up, that area was also the home of different ethnic entities. So there's a Philippine Gardens, there's Yamamoto's Market, Daylight Market, a couple barber shops and pool halls where a lot of the Asian folk had centered around, basically. But after generations had passed, that old dying generation had faded away, particularly because I said many of the Manongs didn't get married because of the racial strife and prejudice, and also there was just a lack of women. So due to anti-miscegenation laws, it really stymied the growth of the Asian American community in Watsonville and South County. Therefore, me being 55, my dad was significantly older than my mom, and thusly, she had, and my mom had, and my dad had me, my sister, my brother. So in our generation, our group, there's all the sins of the Manong generation of Watsonville, and we have a project to try and commemorate and honor our parents' histories, and thusly it's called the Tobera Project. So Fermin Tobera was the 22-year-old farmer who was killed during the 1930 Watsonville race riots. His legacy lives within all of his hopes and dreams to be an American citizen and to, to prevail and achieve, quote unquote, the American dream. It's all within us to live this life of goodness and honor, to really, cement ourselves as human beings, but also as loving citizens of the county. And so we have a project to honor our parents, and that's called the Tobera Project, named after Fermin. Thusly, we've advocated with county officials to get an apology officially 90 years later after the 1930 race riots, and also through the city and county, as well as we have murals in town that are being instituted now to honor our Filipino legacies. We have a curriculum through UCSC called Watsonville is in the Heart. Let me just put a plug here. wiith.ucsc.edu is our website. It's a culmination of oral histories and digital archiving that has reached 50 families to talk about and share their family histories of struggle, strife, and validation. We as community folks, we're just volunteers, just like you guys as well. We want to empower our community and tell our stories, and this is the way we do it. We can only do it so much, as far as sitting in a circle and talking shop, And as you know, we talk about stuff at the dinner table that we don't talk about to the outer public. And thusly, this oral archiving project is really something to share generationally for the folks to come on board down the road to learn about grandpa's story or grandma's story or whatever the case may be. It's really kind of galvanized the community and brought a great sense of pride. So I'm just proud to be here as representing the Tobera Project. I want to let you know that we have an exhibit at the MA just down the street. It ends, unfortunately, on August 4th, which is Sunday. There's a big culmination of poetry and spoken word and literature to be read. Our exhibit is at the MA. It's at Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 12 to 6. Come by, check it out. It's all of our archiving materials from different families who've contributed. And it's really quite special because, like I said, our history is not really shared with the broader public. I can tell you that because of the anti-miscegenation laws, a lot of our folks in the group are Mexipinos, who are half Filipino, half Mexican, as well as the broad, diverse folks of Native American ladies and descendants, as well as white folks too. Really, it's just an honor to be here and share our stories and be part of the broader community. And I appreciate the time and effort of everyone taking the time and listening to my story. I wanted to show one last thing before my show and tell item that was told to bring. So to combat the racial strife and tensions, the Filipinos that congregated, they could not marry, they could not buy land, they could not vote. So organizing labor was very, very difficult. And thusly they formed fraternal lodges, and this is my dad's banner. You can see Caballeros de Dimasalang. Dimasalang was the pen name for Jose Rizal, who was the hero, national hero of the Philippines, and he's the one who fought against the Americans colonizing during the Spanish-American War. So they had a mainstay to honor their homeland, but also knew that this fraternal lodge would bring people together as far as protection. They would walk in town in groups rather than individually, because indeed they'd be subject to violence and threats and such. But the lodge, which we grew up in practically at the Vets Hall, going to dances and such. we were there every Sunday practically, and it was just a good way to share community and share our struggles, but also celebrate life too. Filipinos are very kind-hearted, warm-hearted folks who really look on the bright side despite issues persisting, and just trying to make our families strong and healthy and move along. So none of our families are now currently working in the fields, although we have very strong memories of working in the fields as young people. We have been, our parents didn't want us to work in the fields any longer, and that's why they pushed us to go to Cabrillo and achieve, quote unquote, the American dream, which is still a struggle. So it's ever elusive. Anyways, that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and I thank you for letting me speak.
I just wanted to underscore a couple of things. You mentioned the fact that there's this lodge that served as a congregation point, and I have said too, I mean, we've been hosted by RCNV. Barrios Unidos has repeatedly opened up stores. We have our sites of convergence ourselves. And so, just how important is it for us to be able to have a place to come together collectively? That's huge because we have, in many cases, even today, been banned from certain sites. Our presence has been variously policed. And Roy also shared some images. And Roy, I don't know if you want to speak about any of these, but one of them is a historic poster of "Get rid of all Filipinos or we'll burn this town down." Do you want to just briefly speak about some of these images?
Sure. Which one are we looking at first?
It's the "Get rid of all Filipinos." Mhm.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me? Okay, so that one was widely spread throughout town. A lot of the white folks who were, I got to say, and this is to be honest with you, and you look at San Francisco, Watsonville history, there was a big, stretch of KKK during that time, and that's no lie. Historian Jeffrey Dunn has chronicled that and talked about it in his research. And this was just really the sentiment of the area, white men feeling threatened by brown brothers trying to take their jobs and take their ladies. And indeed, this was fervent through that area. There was times in town there were no Filipinos allowed. You couldn't rent. You couldn't walk into certain places. You couldn't eat in certain areas or go to the bathroom and such. They didn't want Filipinos about. And it just exacerbated during the race riots, which was a 5-day period.
Yeah, thank you. And then there's this next image as well. It's, I don't know if you could see this right here from here. Oh, okay. Let me actually bring it to you. In fact,
Is that? Oh no, it's okay.
oh, you could come here. Yes.
So that's Auntie Tabasa, Rosita Tabasa. She was the matriarch of the community. She was one of the only Filipina ladies around. There was Mrs. Tabungkay, Mrs. Connie Ramirez, and Auntie Tabasa. She has been was a matriarch of the community. Now, of course, men like to think they're the boss, as we all know, but it's not the truth. She was the one who really was the conduit to talk to the police if there was an issue. She'd talk to the mayor, talk to whoever she needed to talk to try and get Filipinos uplifted. She herself helped my mom and dad apply for housing, for low-income housing in Mesa Village, which is off Green Valley near Pinto Lake. We were living on the labor camp, but Auntie said, "Hey, that's no place for you guys to live as a young budding family." And she pushed us and my parents to apply for a low-income housing during LBJ's Great Society plan. And she did all kinds of other things too. She also raised a family of 5. Her husband died early, and so she had a lot of weight on her shoulders. But also the main thing that she did was she was the proprietor of the Philippine Gardens, which is an area where Filipinos came to as far as a card house and a restaurant where they can find salvage, they can find salvation against all the strife that was going outside the doors. So that was our enclave, the Philippine Gardens, which acted as the epicenter for Filipino American activity for decades upon decades before redevelopment said, "Hey, you got to go," which was another struggle unto itself.
Yeah. That's amazing that people who are working the fields through the intervention of your auntie ended up having a Filipino gardens to be able to gather in.
And then
And-
lastly, you should
yes.
know too.
Yes.
So lastly, okay. So lastly, we have a building for low-income housing as one of the things that Christina talked about. We need to establish landmarks. We need to establish landmarks where people can come to and see and just feel embraced by and say, "Hey, that represents me. That represents my family. That represents our struggle. That represents the community at large," basically. So on Atkinson and Freedom, we have a low-income housing development on board now, but Auntie is prominently displayed at the Tabasa Gardens, and you can go by and see it. It's huge. It's a mosaic tiled mural. We have other murals coming up in Watsonville as well. But this is what we need to do to cement ourselves, to really validate, and not just talk about, but validate our stories whether it be at the Ivory Tower or in the community itself, amongst our young people. This is what we need to do is just, flex our muscles, be strong, and speak your truth, and indeed, the good things will happen.
So there are other images, and we can share these out on, we'll place them on the CRJ website, perhaps also on the RCNV website, but there are many other incredible images attesting to Filipino men serving in the U.S. Army, other images from the community, a calendar project, photos from Roy's family as well, but there are a number of images, and we will be sure to share those out. Okay. So let's see. Sorry about this. Okay. I'd like to introduce next. Just give me a moment. Elias Gonzalez, aka Eli, but we say Elias in our PVESJ because we weirdly have two Elis. Okay, so that's what happened. Okay. And Elias is the training and site manager at the organization MILPA, which also has an origin story that emerges out of police violence. And he is the very proud father of Emilio and Graciela, both from the state of Michoacan. And he's, he's the son, excuse me. Yes, and he's very blessed to be the father to two people who have his namesake, Eliana and Elias. And he's the very proud grandfather of a beautiful grandbaby. He was born, raised, and he continues to be a proud resident of Watsonville, his beautiful hometown. He attended Cabrillo as well as CSU MB, and he brings over 20 years of nonprofit and civic experience. He's a seasoned and wise organizer. He has committed his career to working with marginalized and incarcerated communities. He was part of the groundbreaking efforts in Santa Cruz County to promote alternatives to incarceration while seeking to eliminate racial disparities in the youth justice system. MILPA is one of a spectrum of organizations that has organized against the logic that prison is the solution to structural problems of racial capitalism, right? And furthermore, his cultural background and street experience give him a unique facilitation skill set that makes his workshops accessible to a diverse audience of stakeholders. And he brings enormous experience. He was telling me that he has a PhD in barriology. And but that experience actually, and the experience and life journey that he has had, actually, you have a lot of teachers in, what Roy was calling the ivory tower, although it's an ivory tower that police attack and, brutalize people in. But you have a lot of teachers that don't bring a lot of life wisdom to their teaching. And it makes a world of difference when someone does bring that and has firsthand experience of incredible adversity, having understood the underside of the rock. And Elias brings all of that to his organizing, which centers healing. And it's been really wonderful to organize with this crew, all of these people here. I've learned so much from them. Elias, and please put me, yes, and put me to work, and I will.
Oh, no. I think if anything, I'm going to do this. All right. All right, everybody. Let me set a timer because I'm a talker and I can keep going, and I want to make sure that we stick on that time. But thank you, Christine, for that warm introduction. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Right. Thank you for being here early in the morning. Um, First name again, Elias Gonzalez. Please do call me Eli. Mom used to call me Elias only during certain times, right? It's usually Mijo, right? Mijo, 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 until something happens, it's Elias. It's like, oh, what's going on? Luckily, I have navigated that trauma and that drama that we all grow up with, and we all grew up with trauma, right? So again, it's stepping into those spaces. But again, I come with MILPA, motivating intergenerational leadership for public advancement, right? First and foremost, I want to say thank you to Christine. Thank you to the Center for Racial Justice just for inviting us, right? Um, it's about building, it's about organizing. I think that's what we're doing here in this space, building and organizing in this good way, right? But some quick disclaimer before I jump into some few things here, right? First and foremost, I tell people this. If I say anything to insult you or offend you or anything of that nature, if I use the wrong language, anything of that nature, please connect with me afterwards. Those are never my intentions, but we all grew up differently. We all talk differently. We all walk differently. We all come from different walks of life. So if I say something, please connect with me. Those are never my intentions. Once you get to know me, you're like, I think you meant to say this. And we'll figure those things out because I'm about learning and growing. Thank you to both of you all. I learned a lot. And again, even hearing about Mr. Tabasa triggered me just a little bit, right? But again, it's good to hear that history, right? But again, in that good way. Real quick, the request I think for us was to come up here to introduce the work we do at MILPA and to provide some of a teaching element. But again, I like to think that we're going to learn together. Ideally, we'd be sitting in circle. That's what we do, right? We sit in circle, we build in circle, because even this format of standing in front kind of makes me feel like I'm in charge. I'm not in charge. I'm not the leader. I am part of a collective, and we are part of this circle, and we are all part of a circle, right? But with that being said, I'll just keep on strolling. Quick agenda. We're not agenda driven, but we always like to show up in this good way because, again, I can go in different directions, and I ain't trying to do that. I'm trying to stay centered, right? But basics. We'll have questions throughout, right? I'll talk a little about who we are because it's important. I think when we come up here, it's one thing to hear about my org, it's one thing to hear about us. But before we start talking about our struggles, you really have to know who we are and why we're moving in this way, right? It's understanding the people, it's understanding the history, and moving in that will get away. But again, we'll talk about a couple of our struggles. I want to share an approach. Christine talked about healing informed practices. Want to bring that up and why we move in that way. And again, we'll close with questions. And if I move fast enough, I do have an article there that was written by our director, and I just want to highlight one session specifically, and we'll get to that towards the end. But with that, that's what we're hoping to accomplish today, and we'll keep on trucking along here. Our mission, our vision, you can see it there. I think I've provided you all brochures and all that good stuff, so I won't jump into it. I'll give you the time to explore, check it out. Please check us out. Please go online, shameless plug, social media, all that good stuff. Follow us. We have a lot of things happening, and I think it's going to take a village to make the changes we're hoping to make, all of us, not just Milpa. But again, we'll continue moving along. I saw this appear, our struggles, our histories, right? And I think a lot of us, what we're talking about is our stories. I'm hearing stories, right? Historically, we've been separated, right? And it's that group, this group, that group. And I think what we're starting to realize that most of our histories, most of our stories are impacted by those dominant societies, right? We are being impacted by white supremacy and things of that nature, right? And again, no shame, no blame. We want to talk about things and we want to have these conversations so that we can move forward in a healthy way. But some of the struggles that we've been involved in where we've had to organize, right? In Salinas, they were trying to build a new juvenile hall. They were trying to build a new juvenile 120 beds. That was kind of how MILPA was created, right? MILPA was created for system impacted, formerly incarcerated individuals. Initially, it was created for men by men. We men had problems. We had to take care of some things, and we grew up in the society following some machismo and some things of that nature that we're sick too. This society has made us sick, so we had to acknowledge those things. Now that we've been able to acknowledge that through our healing journey, and we're still building in that good way, still figuring things out, I think now we were able to, welcome our sisters, welcome our relatives into the space to be able to build this collective. I love the way Roy said it, right? We always thought we were in charge of the men. It's always been the women. It's always been the grandmas. It's always been my mom, right? I know who makes the decisions. It's mom, right? At the end of the day, she might tell me, you want me to tell your dad? But at the end of the day, it's going to be mom that makes the decision, right? So we know those things. But juvenile hall was, again, 120 beds. It was reduced to 80 beds. It was through the organizing things that happened at MILPA, right? The organizing community building. We realized that MILPA came about, Christine mentioned it. There was 4 murders in the city of Salinas, right? Of Latino men. And again, this happened quickly. Was that just coincidental? If you ask the police department, they'll say, hey, brown people live in Salinas, so it's just what happens sometimes, right? That's what happens. It's got nothing to do with racism. But I think my auntie, I'm calling you an auntie, right? Mentioned it that this is who they're actually targeting. We sit there and say, our people are not at risk. Our people are in danger because our people have been under attack on all this time. Nothing's changed. It's all the same thing. It's been happening. They just converted to something differently, and it's starting to come out again. But again, we organize out those murders. One thing we've been big on is keeping SRO, school resource officers, out of campuses. We are not anti-police, right? We're not against the police. We're not against all that. We're for community. We're about building a community. We're about investing that finance. I think the sheriff department currently, nothing against Sheriff Hart, but they currently have a $103 million budget. And just the other day, they went and asked for 170,000. They got 170,000 to do an SRO in Aptos. Right? So again, your $103 million budget, and they just got 170, and they continue to add to that budget. So those are the conversations we're having, looking at those budgets, showing up to those meetings, having those conversations. We're big on the school to prison pipeline. We know what that's about. A lot of folks will say it's not real, it's not happening. It's very real, and it's very happening, right? And again, mass incarceration. We're about public safety too. We tell people, under the name of public safety, so many folks have been incarcerated, right? For us, public safety can be achieved through different means. It's not gonna take a jail. We know, in fact, incarceration, and the research is all there, how incarceration actually impacts a person. Just by being one day in jail, it impacts the psyche and the mentality. We've been blessed to be able to work with staff. We've been able to work with mentors, and we've been able to work with those incarcerated populations to actually try to do something very different. The rest of the world deals with incarceration. The United States deals with mass incarceration. We are incarcerating our people, and if you look at the budget, I mean, one student, I think, cost us, I don't even know how much it costs to get to Stanford, but I guarantee you it's probably cheaper to send our students to Stanford than to send somebody to prison, and the numbers are there. Right, and I don't have those up-to-date numbers, but incarcerating one person for 1 year cost over $100,000, and I'm sure we could send all our students to Berkeley and Stanford and all these places if we really wanted to change the systems, right? And again, I'll talk about this new one because it's coming up. There is talks about a new jail in Santa Cruz County, right? There is conversations about a new jail, and who's going to fund that? We are. We're going to fund that because we're the taxpayers. So they're having conversations about it. I believe they're trying to get rid of that one there because they need an upgraded one because of all the issues and problems they've had historically. And I think they're trying to get rid of that to build housing. And I think ideally where this new jail will go, guess where? Watsonville. Because everything that happens in Santa Cruz County ends up in Watsonville. Born and raised in Watsonville, we understand that the highest rates of students being kicked out are from Watsonville. The highest suspension rates, the highest exposure, kicked out is expulsions. Suspensions and expulsions are highest in Watsonville. We know that the most youth on probation come from Watsonville. We know all these things are disproportionately happening in Watsonville. Is it because Watsonville folks are bad? No, but that's what we believed growing up. We didn't know any better, right? So now that we started understanding some of these things, stepping away from our trauma, seeing things a little bit differently, we're starting to move in a different direction. But again, I'm going to keep pushing because I can keep talking. But again, I mentioned real quick the murders in Salinas, right? These are some of the articles that were out there, right? For us, it's important, the narrative, and the narrative that's get put out there, right? This is what came out from the news, right? Again, I'm talking about people being shot, no wrongdoing though, right? And at one point, police were not convicted here. We see Salinas police killed 3 Latino men in 90 days. What does that do to your body? What does you do to your psyche as a young person, as a community member, as a mom, as a dad? What is that doing to our body physically? And we know now the body keeps a score. It's keeping the trauma. We're moving stiff. We're so stuck in our ways, right? That's why we bring these medicines up here, and I forgot to acknowledge this because I want to be fast, but that's why we bring this medicines in a good way to guide us, to direct us, but also to remind us why we do this, right? But again, you see these narratives. For us, narrative is important. We step into taking over. Oh, I gotta shut up already. But stop the narrative, right? We gotta change the narrative because the reality is that the stories that are being put out there are not being put out by us. They're being put out by the dominant society that tells a story about us. That's happening no longer. We are now gonna take our stories. We're gonna show up with how we show up in that good way, in a very respectful, courteous way, but with fully authentic selves and speaking truth to power. So again, we talk about the murder in Salinas. Some questions to think about, right? And again, we can come back to some. Maybe you can do it right now because I know I am looking at time. But just look at these, and I think these are the questions that we are asking ourselves, right? What are some of the narratives of notoriety that have shaped the views and expressions of growing people in Salinas? Because we know you think about Salinas, you think certain things. You think about Watsonville, you're like, that's not that town. What are those images? What are those concepts, right? What does it mean to occupy the narrative when we talk about the narrative? What are we saying? What are we talking? What are we doing differently, right? And how are we sharing those stories? And again, what is criminalization, right? Some of us may not know, and some of us are moving differently, but through what discourses or practices do you see certain demographics being criminalized? We know young people from Watsonville are criminalized, right? You see young people like myself. I threw myself as young, I'm a little bit older, but you know what I mean? Like, you see a hat, you see this, and you're like, oh, I see the image, I can know what they are. But the reality is we're not taking time to talk to people, connect with people, to build with people. And that's what we're trying to do in these spaces, right? But we'll continue the dialogue. Think about those questions. A lot of things that are going to be talked about today, we will not be able to answer. But what we hope to do in these spaces is spark that imagination, is to actually start thinking, that thought provocation. And ideally, what we're trying to do is open a door so that you all can come in and say, hey, you said something, and I want to talk more about that. And that's how we'll continue to build. But I'll continue moving. One thing we're big on is around the school resource officers. You can see here some articles of the fights that we've been involved in, and I call them fights because they are fights, right? They're attacking your everything about you, your character, everything. You see, from 2019, we were able to pull out some drug sniffing dogs out of the campuses. That was good in our end. You can see, I think my daughter's quoted on that one. So we talk about this movement being intergenerational. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take the whole community, right? 2020, we can see that we eliminated the SROs. Back in 2021, they had them back, though. We know that's when George Floyd and all those things started happening, right? We also know that's when there was a student that was murdered in Napas High School, right? In 2024, just the other day, they actually just approved another contract. So we're actually going backwards, right? And again, why though? I think it's a lot of things of this nature, right? We have folks out there that think differently, and that's okay, right? We all think differently. We're not all going to think the same, but the reality is that there's people that think that we need SROs back in our schools, and this is the reasoning right here, right? And a lot of this language here is fear mongering. It's not understanding the other side. It's not willing to have a conversation. Those are the things that we're hoping to do, right? This thing here got 1,571 comments. Signatures, a whole lot of comments. I usually encourage people not to go through those comments because they're not nice, but I have to go through them. I have to look at what people are saying, and the reality is that everybody there was not saying nothing good. And we need more officers in our schools. And for me, it's like, no, we don't need officers. We need mental health experts. We need funding for our teachers. We need so many other things. But again, questions to wonder here. Do you know how much your city currently spends in the name of public justice? Do you know how much, I think by the most part, every city in California spends 50 to 60% on public safety. We're talking about police departments. We're talking about fire departments. Watsonville gets, I think 1% for the library, 1% for parks, 40-something% for the police. We wonder why there might be some problems. We always talk about balance at MILPA. It's a little bit unbalanced in that one, right? What would it look like to look at public safety as a public health perspective, right? What if we start looking at this as just the public health? This is actually impacting our health, all of our health. When we work with those staff in the facilities. We realized, and the reason we started working with staff in facilities because we realized they had the highest PTSD rates, they had the highest alcoholism rates, they had the highest suicide rates, they had the effect, they were doing time themselves too. We know that, they know that, and they're doing time themselves, and their families are being impacted too, right? And again, the question we always ask is, what would it look like to reinvest that money into our community? Well, I mean, radically think outside the box, dream beyond measure, right? To actually look, what would our schools look like if we invested this instead of into jails? I think we've built so many universities. We built one university in 20 years. So our approach, and I'll just jump into it. I mean, when I talk about healing informed, the reality is that for a lot of us, we come from a trauma background. We've been fighting all our lives. We've been doing this all our lives, right? And we continue to do the us versus them. We're trying to step away from that dichotomy. And instead of doing this, we're trying to do this. What does it mean to actually do this with community? What does it look like to actually build in this radical way? And building in that radical means that I'm gonna have to look at myself internally. I'm gonna have to challenge myself to some of these things. But with that, I wanted to share this quote because I think we think about narrative, and I think by the brother Malcolm, right? He says, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. I put that out there because if you go do a MILPA search, I encourage you all to do that. You will find some things out there. Come talk to us. There is a narrative that's been put out there by police, by certain departments, by folks that may not agree with what we do. But I encourage you all, now that you've heard about it, talked about it, come talk to us. Let's build, let's connect. We have an open door policy in Salinas and Watsonville. You can come in anytime. We can talk about these things, right? And again, there's a lot of ugliness happening, but I think we bring this picture here because there's a lot of beautiful things happening in all this space, right? This is the work that we've happened to be locally statewide in prisons, circles in prisons, sweat lodges in prisons. It's trying to do something very differently to address the healing of our community. But again, real quick, how much time do I have, Christine? I know we're over.
We're a bit over, but please.
Okay, so real quick, in front of you, I think you all have a document, right? And it's a document that was written by our como se llama, Director Juan Gomez. But it's, again, we cannot tell you everything of how we do, what we move, our struggles without you understanding who we really are, why we move in this direction. But that article right there talks about SROs, right? Why we got involved in this conversation, why we even had to. I mean, did we even think we had to advocate for this? We just thought we could send our kids to school and the schools would be situated, taken care of. But now we're even having to advocate just for our students for basic needs, right? For their basic needs to get met. So again, I've talked a lot. I've posed some questions up here. I hope that maybe you were able to take those questions. This one right here comes out of that article. So you have that article. You also have the slides in front of you. So I think I tried giving to you also, but again, with that, I think I wanted, like I said, if you have a moment to look at that article and maybe if you have a question or two, because again, I was hoping to make it back and forth, but this time it flies really quickly. But again, this is a struggle. The ethnic study is going to be a struggle. Anytime you fight the powers to be, there is going to be a struggle and there is going to be a fight. I think it's in that document. I want to share this like in conclusion, right? I think it says, finally, remember, when we win, we will be attacked. The system doesn't want to see this, doesn't want us to see us be successful. If you're doing the liberation work, the solidarity work, you should be prepared to face the repercussions. That's the reality, right? This is not what they want. Truth telling is very real work. We always say, good luck, we're with you. If you're successful, we're all successful, right? But again, educators here, we always say, folks are in the front line, right? We might not, we will be in the front lines of the protests, but everybody that comes here has come through the education first, right? Primarily. Educators, some of the first contact with hope. So again, a lot of us are educators. You don't have to be a teacher, but we're all educating. We're also, I think a lot of times when folks come up, we can provide hope. We can provide that glimmer of hope. And just even that, you see me, right? Yeah, I see you. And actually looking at someone who introducing yourself, some of the basics, right, that we've forgotten. But again, with that being said, I think that kind of narrows it there. And if you have any questions, you can come afterwards. Is that what we're hoping to do?
Yes, I mean, Yes, we'll have some time for Q&A at the very end. So please do hold some of your questions. I'm sorry this couldn't be as interactive as Elias had initially planned. But I mean, thank you so much for this incredible presentation. And, you know, you can see that this statement that you have in your hand, children of the MILPA, I mean, think about if this were taught in a classroom, right? Like, think about if this is the kind of encounter with hope here. And there's also the statement, you know, many people use terms like abolition, but do they focus on the healing? Like, do they enact the healing? And so there's really, there's depth and dimension here. And I also wanted to say too that, you know, that quotation too from, was it Malcolm X speaking about newspapers and, you know, some of the newspaper articles about the killing of 4 Latino men, you know, that served as a kind of spark for MILPA. When you read the articles, you see that actually the police department of Salinas tried to intervene against people who were commenting from the community. And the people who were commenting from the community were saying, this is racist. And then the police department, the chief said, well, it's not racist because a majority of the people are Latino. So how could it be racist? And so then, like, that presents us with an opportunity to show our students, or even in our own community spaces, to say, well, no, actually, how is it racist? How is it racist? And to like work against those kinds of very superficial, distracting arguments, right? So I would like to introduce next Sylvia Morales. Sylvia is the executive director of the place that we're in, the Resource Center for Nonviolence. And she has exemplified in this role transformative leadership in nonviolence and civil rights advocacy. And she has a very interesting definition, I want to say a critical one, of what nonviolence is, particularly within the Latinx community. She has degrees from New College of California, including a JD, and she's seamlessly integrated rigorous academic training with robust community activism. Since 2020, she's spearheaded innovative anti-racism programming at RCNV, significantly expanding its influence both locally and online, including offering up a space for anti-imperialist organizing. Morales also contributes strategically to a number of boards, influencing public policy and educational reforms, underscoring a commitment to justice and community building. Her leadership not only advances nonviolence, but also paves sustainable paths for future advocacy within this area. And as we all know, this is historically such a hard place to organize in. And truth be told, RCNV has a history of white progressive organizing, and Sylvia has really had a transformative role in centering this as a space for communities of color to come to and organize in. Sylvia.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to move this because I feel like I have to look around it and it's in my way. Sorry. Thank you. I want to thank Christine for pulling us all together. And I want to be really honest. This is the first time I'm even seeing some of you, because running the center is a 80-hour-a-week job. And I started, I'm not going to talk about my dad right now. I was going to talk about my personal history, but let me just, I'll tie him in later. I was hired, well, I came to the Resource Center before I was hired. So I was working with SCORE, and that's Santa Cruz County Community Coalition to Overcome Racism, as a volunteer for probably about 4 years. And SCORE was a program of the Resource Center. So I came to SCORE as a volunteer because I was looking for training, anti-racism training for the teachers that I was working with at Pacific Collegiate School. I came to Pacific Collegiate School really working like way under my, I have a JD, so coming to work at Pacific Collegiate School really wasn't something that I planned, but thought, okay, let's give this a try. It was to come in and diversify the campus. And if you can only imagine the challenge, and I love myself a challenge. And I'm just gonna say that the politics on campus were entrenched, we'll just say. But I did a really smart thing. I did 3 months of observation. For 3 months, I wasn't given a space to work initially. I wasn't given an office or a desk or a chair. There was no expectation that I ever show up to work. They expected that I would do all of my work from home. So I said, that's not gonna work. I gotta be on campus every single day, even though I was only hired to be a part-time diversity coordinator. So I showed up every day. I worked 40 hours a week. I came every single day and I sat in the teachers union and the teachers lounge. And in that teachers lounge, every single teacher would come in there and they'd be coming in and having their snacks, and I'd be working, and really what I was doing was reconnaissance. So I got to know every single teacher, and I never started with expressing any opinion or anything. I needed to get to know the people first, so that I can plan out the work that was needed. I heard all kinds of different comments, like, aren't you afraid of white flight? Like, how are we ever gonna get people of color here? They live so far away. On and on and on and on and on. Then the excuses and the sentiments were incredible. And then I realized we need to do some anti-racism work in this campus. So I sought out SCORE. They were organized here at the center. I brought them in. They did some really important work with the school and myself, and I joined that team, became trained in doing the work of SCORE, and I started to facilitate my own sessions and started to work with all kinds of different groups in the county and all kinds of different government departments, and everybody across, even private companies were bringing us in to do the SCORE work. I'm gonna fast forward. So that was really my introduction to the Resource Center, right? I came in, sat on the steering committee, and then just started to become really involved in taking a look at the Resource Center and trying to figure out what was needed in terms of shifts and changes. And so I brought my lens in as well, and one of the first things that I recommended that we do was to create a whole different strategic plan to really refocus the work of the center to focus more on the local struggles of people of color, because that's what I was interested in, and that's what I figured, if we're gonna do nonviolence work, how am I gonna sit in a nonviolence training and never talk about POC struggles? That didn't make any sense to me. So, especially since nonviolence was born out of POC struggles, like literally. You know what I mean? So I'm laughing, but it was painful to witness, and also always found myself challenging the notion of nonviolence, and found myself sitting in trainings with nonviolence trainers with my own personal struggle around violence, with my own experience of having been raised in an impoverished, incredibly violent community. Beautiful, right? Because my family was there. But witnessing violence against myself, witnessing violence done against my people, witnessing violence done against full, like, every single layer of my existence was impacted by the conditions created for me in the community that I landed in. And I say landed because my family was forced to migrate to the United States to survive. So with that, I have a very different understanding of what it means to be nonviolent, because I came to nonviolence as a personal liberatory expression, and the place that it began for me was interpersonally. And then once I understood that I needed to break away from the cycle of violence that was perpetuated upon me as a person, I needed to bring my family with me. And that was an even harder struggle, because that meant that for years I had to break ties with them until they were willing to negotiate power with me as an equal. And what that meant was that they needed to learn to accept my ambition as a woman, that I wasn't going to fall into traditional roles of motherhood and wifehood, that I wanted to go to law school. And not only did I want to go to law school, I wanted to go to a public interest law school, and I wanted to do this kind of work. So off the charts crazy in their eyes, because what do you need that for? Anyway, I laugh, but the journey through that experience, the hazing that is law school, because that's what it is, it's a hazing, came for me with also the need to cut the umbilical cord, because in order for me to be able to get through the hazing, I couldn't be, I had to have the intellectual freedom to be able to focus on the things that were demanded upon me. And if you don't know already, many of you probably do, but if you're gonna be seeking anything in academia, you gotta have some resources. You gotta have, space. You gotta have some freedom, some economic resources, support. So as soon as I got to law school, I joined La Raza Lawyers Association, became president of the Student La Raza Lawyers Association, and realized, let's bring on some more Latinos. There were 3 of us. So by the time I graduated, there were 15 or 16. And that was an important shift for me. But back to this institution. I bring that story in because the struggle when I arrived here didn't end. The struggle is still current in the moment. And it's called the Resource Center for Nonviolence. We have resources that have been primarily focused on white populations with white leadership, with some amazing intentions, and I can't even begin to express the level of impact that this center has had locally, nationally, and internationally around certain issues like anti-nuclear power, anti-war, support of Palestine, a 2-state solution with Israel. It is immense. But I will say that when I got here, nobody sat me down and said, hey, do you know our incredible history? Let me outline it for you. I have had to literally pull down the boxes from the attic, go through files that started from the 1970s to learn myself what we've done. And I only say that to say that I don't know that there was an intention not to share information, but here I am, a brown woman, leading a historically white institution with my own idea about where our resources should go. And it hasn't been a smooth transition. I'm just gonna be honest. I feel that this work has to come with an incredible amount of transparency and honesty. And the shift that's needing to happen right now is that when you are an institution that is focused on pushing initiatives that white community members are interested in, you're going to get a lot of money. But when you shift those interests, the money isn't necessarily going to be there as easily. It's not going to flow in like before. So the shift that has been needing to happen is, how do we do this work for issues that pertain to people of color, right, in this community right here in Santa Cruz, and continue to stay financially stable so that the resources can continue to flow out as they always have. And that's the challenge. And I think the answer is to break out of Santa Cruz. And the beautiful thing about COVID was that it allowed us to pivot, to shift from doing just center-based programming to online programming. So we took all of our programming online, which allowed us to get, to bring people in from the whole state of California, from across the nation, and internationally. So we had people attending our sessions from Italy, from Japan, expats from all over the world that were looking for community, that were looking for POC identity, that were looking for liberation work. So I know that the interest is there, and that's really exciting for us. Let me bring it back. I want to share a little bit about how I met Christine. So our work on supporting the liberation of Palestine started in the 1970s. But when I got here, the work was very minimal. Our Palestine Justice Coalition was really down to 1 or 2 members. So I just kept going, what is going on? What is this group about? And how are we going to continue this work supporting Palestine? But in the moment, there was nothing really happening in Palestine. This is before, the attack on Hamas began. And so we get this inquiry from Christine about hosting the conference, the critical study of Zionism here at the center. And from the ethnic studies department, so I'm like, sure, right? Because ethnic studies, I am at ethnic studies, right? So I'm thinking, that's a beautiful conference. And we agreed to do it. And then the pushback began. The phone calls began from the temple because they were not happy with our hosting of this conference. And so that required me to really try to figure out what's the problem. I don't really understand the problem. If the community in Santa Cruz has been for people of color, Palestinians are people of color, and don't we need to learn about them? So it's been a really difficult journey since we decided to host that conference. When I say difficult, what I mean is, I think had I been Scott Kennedy, and this hall is named after him, I don't know that I would have received the same kind of treatment around this issue. But it's because I'm a female, I'm a woman of color, I look Palestinian, that there has been a different reaction to hosting this conference, and to even migrating the conference into this event, which is about ethnic studies. And the thing that really charged me up about wanting to host that particular conference was when I dug a little deeper and I discovered that the problem with hosting the conference was really connected to a desire to push back on ethnic studies in our own country, in our own state of California. It fired me up, and I said, bring it. I don't care if you don't like it. And I know that sounds insensitive because we're supposed to be the Center for Nonviolence, and we are. I'm not advocating for violence of any kind, but I think that at some point, we need to stand up for our own liberation, not apologize for it. And if anything, as long as I'm the executive director for this center, I'm always going to fight for spaces where we can talk about our business, where we can talk about our history, where we can learn and grow, and I'm going to protect that until I'm not here any longer. Thank you.
I think Jenny and I are reliving the experience of this with you too. And as horrendous as it was for you in different ways, it was so horrendous for us and other people in this community. But it presented all of us with an opportunity to look at where we're at, look at the interests that condition the politics of this area, and to really clarify what our commitments are. And if there is a fear around ethnic studies, and there's this argument that's being made, like, don't do liberatory ethnic studies, only do inclusionary ethnic studies. Ethnic studies has to be maximally inclusive, including of repressive ethno-nationalisms. But no, we say no. We say that ethnic studies, we're not saying liberation for a few, not at all. We're saying liberation for the broadest possible collective. And what we're doing today is not an across-the-board comprehensive discussion. This is not every single organization that can and should be here is here. But this is a starting point for us to be able to build out a curriculum that serves in a broad sense the community, and that centers the freedom dreams of people within this community. And just thank you for having had the courage, because this past year, we have hosted a number of events here around everything from the ICSC conference to ethnic studies, and even before that, we had events here, but that was really the turning point. That was the catalyst for prompting a conversation that's been community-wide around it's both an issue that is here and seems to be afar, but it's really the question of Palestine is a local question, and it's taken all sorts of manifestations. I don't want to take more time for myself. I want to introduce, we have two more speakers, and it's really a great just such a great honor to be in conversation with everyone here. And, you know, we also have an opportunity. There have been organizations that have been here for long enough that there's another generation of organizer that's come up. And I'd like to introduce someone who is from Barrios Unidos who represents that new generation. And that's Josh Petstone, who was born in Hayward to a multiracial Mexipino immigrant family. And he experienced the devastating effects of racialized systemic violence firsthand, and knows that structure of violence intimately. Both his parents were incarcerated throughout his childhood, and his father indeed was deported back to the Philippines, leaving his immigrant grandmother to raise him. And at 18, Josh had the opportunity to go to Merritt College, where the Black Panther Party was formed, and where he met faculty and students, again, this kind of spark of hope, right? These were people who were deeply committed to the legacy, not of maximal inclusion of everything existing, including repressive ethno-nationalisms, but of liberation and revolutionary struggle. After years of personal struggle and professional development, Josh, at 27, transferred to Santa Cruz as a returning student and majored in sociology. Throughout his studies, he connected with radical groups locally and individuals in Santa Cruz, and that included finding Barrios Unidos. And this is where he currently serves as development officer and program coordinator. And this has enabled him to really focus his efforts on organizing, developing alongside, and working with previously incarcerated individuals and historically marginalized communities. Okay. Okay. All right. But yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and pass. Yeah, please join me in welcoming Josh. Now, I'm going to pass out some handouts.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us. Really grateful to be representing Barrios here. We have Omar, also our youth coordinator from Barrios, and one of the founding members, Marilu, here from Barrios. We're here to talk about this poster that was posted all throughout Midtown when Barrios Unidos first moved to their current facility. This is way before I became a part of the organization, so I'll give some time for Marilu to talk about that time and what that meant. But these were predominantly, or just all white community members who saw a group of brown activists doing work in their community, and they didn't like it, so they posted this. They called for a city council meeting. But before we talk about this, I just want to give a brief overview of Barrios for those who don't know, just to kind of contextualize what this means. So Barrios Unidos is an organization that's dedicated to healing, cultural empowerment, political consciousness, and community development so that each person we work with could realize their sacred purpose. So we use a lot of culture, education, with people in our community and with a lot of our relatives behind bars. Barrios Unidos has been doing work within prison institutions since the 1980s. And it really formed out of a necessity, out of community members, including our founder, having family members that were incarcerated and friends who had family members that were incarcerated. And these friends and family didn't have a means to travel the distance to visit their family members, to put money on their family members' books. So Barrios Unidos and the network it had at the time formed a mutual aid network where people were giving each other rides. They formed a network to transport each other to visit their family members, and work to create a system to where when they get out, they have tools to reintegrate into society, because the institutions weren't giving that, and they still don't to this day. So Barrios Unidos was founded in 1977 by our current executive director, Nane Alejandrez. Nane, along with Marilu, grew up in a migrant farm working family in Fresno. And by the time of the Vietnam War, Nane was drafted to the Vietnam War, where he experienced unspeakable violence. And Nane tells the community when he came back from Vietnam, back to Fresno, he says it was like coming from one war zone to another, because his community was embroiled in intergroup violence, gang violence, state violence, economic exploitation. But in the midst of that violence, there were community members and leaders like Cesar Chavez that were organizing within that community. And Nane found inspiration from the farm worker struggle that was started by Filipino and Chicano farm workers. So through that, Nane ended up at UC Santa Cruz, where he's trying to find a Chicano studies course, ethnic studies course. And this was in 76, 77. And somehow Nane found, by accident actually, UC Santa Cruz, and began his studies in Chicano studies and film studies. That's where Barrios Unidos was founded. Nane and his wife Jenny started printing out shirts, just says Barrios Unidos, stop the violence, through selling tacos and burritos, and just creating the means by themselves alongside their community members as the only Chicanos at that time at UC Santa Cruz, out of the trunk of his car, gathering people. Through his lived experience, he 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 knew he had to do something about stopping violence. So the organization has evolved over time, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I just want to show a short clip since Nani's on sabbatical right now. He couldn't be here. But we have a video. Yeah, this is an A&E documentary. I think it was produced in the late 90s. And it's younger Nane talking about his inspiration and the work that Barrios Unidos does.
Since then, the influence of Cesar Chavez, came into my life. When I was coming up as a teenager, I used to hear how about this man out there organizing in the fields, and his man was Cesar Chavez, and seeing that he was doing all this work in a nonviolent way, I always admired that. And I've been working to try to teach myself about nonviolence and teaching what I'm learning. There's so many words to describe the violence out there. You have young people that have been disrespected, violated, abused. And so we have a lot of young people that are rebelling. The thing that I see is that we're rebelling against ourselves. In the 80s, we started to see a lot of young people coming up in the gang culture, and all of a sudden it was out of control. And now we're trying to solve it by incarcerating our young people. But there's other solutions other than incarceration. Barrios Unidos basically started as a concept. What it means, in translation, united neighborhoods. We wanted to unite the neighborhoods. And we've created several chapters in California and throughout this country. In order to stop the violence, we must create alternatives for our young people. In Santa Cruz, we're doing it through economic development, education, community outreach.
Okay. And by force of character, by personally intervening in the life of a kid at the moment that kid might be making a choice about.
Okay. So yeah, just a little context into the history. So what started, like Nani said, United Neighborhoods, what started as interrupting brown on brown Chicano violence has evolved over the years to interrupt black on black, black on brown, white gangs across the country. And through working within in these institutions, we evolved to interrupt state violence against incarcerated individuals by providing what the institutions claim they're meant to provide, which is rehabilitation. So what Barrios provides in the prisons is a sense of personal cultural empowerment, a sense of family, which puts us apart from many of the other programs in the prisons, a sense of political consciousness, which has proven transformational to countless individuals who've come out of prisons, many of which thought they were going to die in prison. They've come out of prison after working with us, and many of which have gone on to start their own organizations. So throughout the years, Barrios Unidos has planted seeds of hope and empowerment for individuals by providing that political education, that cultural education, and by providing ceremony. So the guiding principles of Barrios has evolved, but it's stayed the same. The core principles stayed the same, which is unity and solidarity. And it's changed with history, with different political contexts that have risen out of history, but it's always stayed the same. Barrios Unidos, bringing people together, sense of unity. So given that, folks posted this poster around, and they had to have had a sense of some sense of what we're doing, and despite that, we were still unwanted in the community, and we were still criminalized without doing anything wrong. So I'm going to leave it to Marilu to talk a little bit about that time and what that meant.
Thank you. I actually came here to support, I want to support all of you. Thank you so much. Ena tawa shishiniti, tawa ena tawa shisha, anati washi. Always, we try to teach to honor our ancestors and our native language that we were all ripped from. So that is my native language. And then Spanish. And then I went to school, and it was, you can't speak Spanish, you have to speak English. So now I speak whatever I speak because sometimes I don't even make sense. I'm speaking 3 languages at once, But I do want to honor the 3 Musketeers that were here. Oh, you were so inspirational to me. We must always, always, and Shirley Munoz, thank you for always being there for us. We must always, Willow is always backed up Barrios Unidos. We try to teach our young people to always honor our elders because that's where our history is. Ethnic studies, if you put that poster back up for a minute, it just is a trigger for me, because when that poster was put up, people didn't believe that a Latino organization could come and buy property in Santa Cruz.
Domingo?
And so when we bought that property on SoCal Avenue, we made history. No Latino organization in California had ever owned its own property. They've always rented, right? So we were actually the first. So we made history in that, but history has a price, right? So we got attacked by the neighborhood. Just a couple individuals, a couple haters, that didn't want us there. This was a white neighborhood. What are you doing here? Even the tenants that we inherited couldn't believe that they were going to be paying rent to Latinos. Even that was a struggle, believe it or not. But the thing was, that poster went up all over this neighborhood, 3 blocks this way, that way, whatever. But what's interesting about that poster was I was in the office one day and I went outside for a minute, and then I saw about 15, less than 20, all white elderly people coming to our parking lot, right? And I run inside and I said, Nani, there's some white people coming and they all have the poster, right? They all had the poster, So I didn't know what they were going to do. And these were senior citizens, you can't beat up a little viejito, They were all senior citizens that came. And so they came in and they said, we want to talk to who's in charge. And so right away, that's him, my brother. It was really funny. Nana's my older brother, by the way. So anyway, so I could do that. And so they came and they said who they were. They introduced themselves. And they said, we didn't know this, but there's a church at the end of the block, way at the end. And they said, we all go to this church. And we want you to know that we are not okay with this. And they tore the poster in front of us. And they said, we like what you do. And if you need support, we've been here longer than any of these neighbors, So it was a surprise to us, right? So, but what happened was when we went to city council, right? Because of this neighbors that didn't want us there, we went to city council, and city council was scared at that time. The people that were at city council, they were very nervous about what's going to happen, because you had white people and you had Latinos, and it could go all up, and they didn't know what was going to happen. Right? So they kept putting us off. They kept putting us back on the agenda and back on the agenda and back on the agenda. Okay, so they said we were going to bring all these gang members. So we brought all our little kids club, and we sat all the little kids right in the front. These are the gang members you're talking about. And anyways, but what happened at city council was they actually didn't hear us till 1 o'clock in the morning. That's how far they pushed us, because they were hoping we would leave. You know, we said, we're not leaving, and you're not leaving until you hear us. You know, so we stood there and fought. We had to let the children go home because they were little, you know. But, and what ended up happening was the people that put this, eventually, they shot themselves in the foot, you know, right? So city council voted on our side, you know. It says, but it was a very, very emotional time. This was in 90, we bought the property in 96. We moved in 98. So that happened between 97 and 98. I can't remember the year exactly, but that's what that poster was about. But I wanted to share and thank all of you, you know, for your stories, you know, and the Filipino, a lot of people give Cesar Chavez a lot of credit, and I do. They forget about Dolores Huerta, you know, but, you know, the Philippine population is the one who started the strikes, you know, and they were overlooked because Cesar Chavez was more vocal out there or whatever. But, you know, we have to thank the Filipino people, because they are the ones that opened that door for us to fight for the rights. So I don't want to take that away from them. And, you know, this room should be packed. This room should be packed, you know, but the thing is that Nane always says, you don't have to, like, tell everybody, let the people tell your story. So you people will tell the story of what you heard from each and everyone here tonight. You know, and the thing also about Barrios Unidos is that we have to pass the torch to the next generation, you know? And yeah, ethnic studies is very important. We do not, those who are older like me, you know, I do not want my granddaughter or my neighbor's little kids going back to reading See Dick Run or See Jane Run. You guys don't know about that, but they were the books that we had to read, and it was all white kids. There was nobody of color, you know, and we got hit in school. The principal could hit us for speaking Spanish. You know, they start slowly. They're going to get to that point. We have to stop this. We cannot allow them to rob our children from our true history of what really happened to us and where they can go, you know, to the universities. They can be whoever they want, you know, and so we need to embrace them, but also teach them how to be nonviolent. It's true, there is a lot of violence, but it's because it's misplaced anger. You got young people with their parents locked up. You got young people with, you know, maybe they're hungry and they can't concentrate in school. You know, there's different things. We have to understand why, you know. What's the source? That was the key of the Three Musketeers. Where's the source coming from, right? Where's the source coming from? You know, and again, like when Nana came back from Vietnam and what he said, what was his eye-opener was, it was a Vietnamese lady that put her arm next to him and said, look at my skin and look at your skin. We are the same color. Why are you killing our people? You know, it's like, it was a wake-up call for him. You know, so we need to remember, what's the source? Who's behind this? You know, so we need to call people for what it is, you know, and it's, racism is alive and well. You know, it's just the way they're so good about sneaking it under. But anyways, just thank you guys for being here. Thank all of you for being brave enough to be up there, you know.
Thank you so much. You know, I mean, we can envision that, and I want to ask again, like, who's a teacher right now of any stripe that's in the house? I mean, let us build out a curriculum together. We just heard an incredible testimony that should be part of what gets taught. And so, you know, you have some handouts there. Part of that are quotations taken, things that Nane said in a Lookout article. And then also tied to that, I mean, like, you know, for those posters to appear, Josh had been telling me about them, for those to appear, the moment that Barrios Unidos goes from the beach flats to Seabright, what does that say about the class and racial sort of assumptions about who has a right of place where. Like, what does that actually say? And what if students were going to study that? It echoes with the sign that Roy had. You know, it echoes like no Filipinos allowed, right? It echoes with the Jim Crow South. You know, like, so I think that there's a way in which you teach that archive. And, you know, I just added one thing too, which is a handout from Lisa Marie Cacho. I'm sorry that we didn't have enough copies, but it's her handout on it's her work on social death. And she says that there are people who are perceived through a criminalizing lens by the state. And she uses these terms in quotation marks. She says it's the illegal alien, it's the terrorist, and it's the gangbanger. And she says that people who are perceived as inhabiting or occupying that status don't actually have to do anything to be criminalized. They don't have to commit a crime. It's by dint of existing and being perceived through that criminalizing lens. It's by dint of association. It's by dint of location. So these are all the ways in which criminalization / racialization occurs. So, you know, like having a sense of Santa Cruz as racialized space and having a discussion about that and posing questions about that, that could be transformed into a lesson plan. So we could have so many, you know, and I love the fact too that there's been so much discussion too of the site of the school itself. And, you know, what Elias or Eli was saying about, like, you know, school security officers, right? And to think about how ethnic studies enables students not to just be like, this is the structure of school, and I come here and I'm supposed to open up my book and bury my like nose in a book and stick to a spot in the library, but instead to say, what is the function of my education, and what does this site of this institution socially reproduce? What structures does it reproduce, and how? So that the students then don't ignore the structure, not that they do, because it impacts them in so many ways, but that they're invited to turn their critical lens and have an opportunity to collectively discuss the site of education itself and what it socially reproduces in the forms of violence that it upholds. And so, you know, I would love for all of us who are educators and those of us who are in the community, all of us together, and we can take a page out of Roy's playbook in terms of Watsonville is in the heart, and let's co-construct a curriculum that serves the people here, right? In ways that are challenging, yes, but ways that are fundamentally needed. So I'd like to introduce our last speaker. And our last speaker, it's been such a pleasure to actually organize alongside Omar and to have developed a friendship and kinship with so many of the people here, you know, on the stage and in the audience. And Omar is a local activist, mentor, and leader, and he's something of a local legend. And he attended Aptos High, where he fought for and led movements on campus. Okay, this included the fight against Proposition 187, but also against the local power elite who are arguing for the segregation of the school district, right? And so, and he also fought for the establishment of Mecha on campus. He ran a slate for Chicano studies in the 1990s. And all but one person on that slate was elected, and he became the first president, Chicano president at Aptos High. And he continues that work to this day by fighting for ethnic studies, justice, and the next generation. He is committed to cultura and indigenous teachings because they empower students, and we know that they do, to create a more just and equitable world. Today, he works at Barrios Unidos, where he serves as the youth outreach specialist and mentor. And yeah, I am going to hand the microphone over to Omar. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you. I lit some sage and some cedar because I want to invite all our ancestors that fought in the struggle before us, all the children that died in the struggle, all the mothers that died in the struggle, all the fathers that died in the struggle, and all of us who are still in the struggle. So I want to play a little bit of flute to honor my teacher in the back and everybody that's ever fought in the struggle. And bear with me, I'm a little nervous. To all my relations, I'm super nervous, but thank you for inviting me and allowing me to tell my story. So it says en movimiento, student empowerment. I am ethnic studies. And when I put I am ethnic studies, I'm not talking about me. I want it to, when you guys read it, you guys are talking to yourself. I am ethnic studies. You are ethnic studies. Everybody here has fought a struggle once in their lifetime, and that's ethnic studies. Okay, I didn't cross no border. The border crossed me. I was born in Mexico City, raised in Watsonville, California. Both my parents worked in the fields, and they also worked in the canneries in Watsonville. And they were both Teamsters. And because of the strike, they ended up working in private schools. My mom was a cook, and my dad was a janitor at a Salesian Sisters in Corralitos. And so my luck, I got to go to a private school with a bunch of nuns. So part of my family was 30 nuns that were just like my mother and father. So here's some pictures of me and my family. My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, you know, way back in the day. And here's some more pictures. Now, I want to paint this picture real quick. This is Sister Lupe right here. She baptized my sister, so she's considered my family's comadre, my parents' comadre. But imagine this on Christmas time. It is Christmas Day. A big van pulls up at your house, and 30 nuns get off of the van, and they stand on the lawn, and they start Christmas caroling, right? And my mom used to tell me, my brother, come on, get out there, button up your shirt, look nice. And we had to be there. All the neighbors be watching, and I'd be so embarrassed, you know? My mom would always volunteer us to be altar boys, you know, for the nuns. And then after they would sing a Christmas carol, she would take us inside and have us perform, play the guitar, play the piano, whatever, tell a joke, whatever. So yeah, so they worked for the nuns for a long time. Like I said, when they strikes were going on and then the earthquake hit, they ended up working for the nuns for like 20 plus years. So I kind of like rebelled against going to private schools because I wanted to go to public schools, and so I rebelled. So I wasn't always an angel growing up. Um, but growing up in Watsonville, I grew up surrounded by gangs in the '90s, and in the '90s, I would say it was a violent era for gangs in Watsonville. There's an article right here talks about the murders that happened in Pajaro with George Cortez and Jessica Cortez, 15 and 9 years old, were both shot. I used to work with George Cortez at the YMCA, and it was a big murder that happened, and it impacted the community big. Growing up, you hang out long enough at a barber shop, you're gonna get a haircut. Goes to say with gangs, you hang out with gang members, you're probably gonna run with them. I got kicked out of private schools and ended up at community schools. Was not always an angel. But when I ended up at community schools, I ended up meeting a gentleman named Guillermo Aranda. He's a local muralist whose art is everywhere in California. He's also a White Hawk leader of the White Hawk Dancers, co-founder of the White Hawk Dancers. He taught me a lot of indigenous teachings, the sweat lodge, Aztec ceremonies, gave me a sense of pride, gave me a sense of empowerment, and alternatives to gang life and stuff like that, and showed me la cultura cura, which is a famous saying that Barrios and a lot of organizations use these days, right? Here's a picture of my sister who still dances with them. There's a picture of my brother who still dances with them. My brother is also a sweat leader. He runs lodge. So through community schools, I ended up at Aptos High School. I was one of the first waves of students that was bused from Watsonville to Aptos due to overcrowding. And as soon as the students were bused to Aptos, there was resistance. There was racism. Aptos, if you don't know the school, is mostly white. And as soon as we were bused into Aptos, they were saying we were lowering the quality of education. We were bringing gangs to the school. The school seems darker now. We heard it all. For some reason, this image didn't show up, but it was an image of Barrios Unidos logo, and they had a program at Aptos High School called Ganas, which stood for Gang Alternative North and South. And let me say something right now, and if I get emotional, it's because Barrios Unidos. Barrios Unidos saved my life. And it's an honor to be working for them. So, they planted that seed. And I used to attend this group, Ganas, at Aptos High School. And the guy that used to run that group, he's still my counselor. He's still my mentor. I'm 47 years old, and I still call him every day, every once a month or so. And I check in with him. And thank you. And, that's the kind of impact he had in me as a mentor. And I'm very grateful to be at Barrios Unidos. So getting to Aptos High School as a immigrant student, because I was born in Mexico, and a lot of the students that were bused to Aptos were migrant students. We used to say, we were mariners, but we used to say, yo soy marinero, right? Marineros Unidos was a club that was at Aptos that already existed when we got there. There was a Migrant Parents Club. Student body didn't have any Chicano representation. Faculty had very few teachers who we could relate to. Administration was all white. A big part of our school that was getting bussed in there was migrant. And then Proposition 187 came up. And I seen an article in El Andar, and this guy protested 187 by having himself crucified to a cross on the border with a bunch of people standing around protesting. And this article made such an impact in me that I knew I had to do something in my community to protest it, to honor this guy. So what I did was the next day, I showed up to school early, 6 in the morning, tried to get into the art supplies, and luckily there was a new staff member that I was able to manipulate to open it up. And I remember grabbing a big roll of paper and some paint brushes and a can of paint, and I rolled this paper out in the football field, and I just started making signs down the line. No Proposition 187, give us our rights, all kinds of different signs. And as soon as the bus started coming in, I started spreading the word, hey, 8 o'clock comes, we're gonna walk out, and the word got around. And as soon as that first bell rang, everybody went to the football field, and we gave a brief description of why we're walking out, what it stands, 187 stands for, why it's injustice. And one thing that we made clear was that it was going to be a peaceful walkout, and that we were going to fight for our right to stay at Aptos High School. So due to that article, that's how that movement started at Aptos High School. I just knew something was not right at Aptos, and I was tired of the bullshit, and I had to do something about it. So here's a picture of us walking from Aptos all the way to Watsonville High School. There's a sign right here I'm very proud of. If you see the sign in the back right there, it says, Wilson, eat a big burrito. This is me right here, in the middle right here with the jukebox, and these are all the students, close to 900 students, walked all the way from Aptos to Watsonville. And when the administration said, who's in charge here? I said, we all are. Well, which way you guys going? So we lied to the administration. We told them we were going to go a certain route. So they had the sheriffs all go that route, to close off the roads. And we decided we were going to take a U-turn and went the opposite way. Chicano students organized and ran for Aptos student body. We didn't have no representation in the student body. Si se puede. I'd rather die fighting than living on my knees. Tell me I can't, I'll show you I can. And that's just the mentality that I had. I was so motivated to make change at that school because of the racism and just the white parents. It was, a lot of the opposition that we faced was from the parents, not really from the students. It was from the white parents in the community. So, what we did was we organized and we started running for student body president, vice president, all the positions in student body, and I ended up winning the student body president. We won the vice president and all that. It says right there, Omar was elected president and Carmen Becerra was elected vice president. The election of Latino students represented a shift in the school's demographics. And the result of aggressive busing program began about 8 years ago. Racial tensions. So in the 20 years that school's been open, we were the first that were Chicanos to represent ASB in that school. And there's some more newspaper articles. This whole struggle that we did at Aptos was well documented in the Register Pajaronian and well documented in the Santa Cruz Sentinel, a lot of the local papers. But not everything went so smooth. 3 days after I got elected student body president, I was falsely accused of having a firearm on campus and being involved in a drive-by shooting. And this was I got pulled into the principal's office and was asked all these questions. And keep in mind, as a 17-year-old, being accused of a drive-by shooting and having a gun is pretty scary. So when that happened, I remember they had no police report, nothing. It was just the principal and the administration accusing me of these charges. And at the time, I didn't know it was because I was the student body leader. But, looking back, that's the only reason that I could think that they were trying to accuse us, because they didn't want us in office. And I remember walking back to my history class, and I heard the Three Musketeers talk about teachers, how important they are. My history teacher was also a very important person in my struggles and the movement. If I could describe him to another teacher, I would describe him to Jaime Escalante. He was that kind of teacher. More newspaper articles talking about the controversy that I was being accused of. So what we did was we organized. My parents got a lawyer. We had a family friend that was a lawyer, showed up to the school board meetings, held the school board accountable for not taking action on the principal. We got the principal to offer an apology, and then later on he resigned. So right here, these are important role models that I had in high school. The top corner was Carlos Mujal, which was my history teacher. Tomas Alejo Sr., who was part of the movement, who used to take me to radio shows to talk about the movement. He used to take me around the community to different events. Bobby Salazar, very important at Aptos High School, a custodian that was everybody's friend, big heart. And this is Alan Sowelli, who was my mentor from Barrios Unidos at the time through the Ganas program, who I still talk to today. Mr. Alejo passed away. Bobby Salazar passed away. I don't know what happened to Carlos Mujal, and he lives in LA. I was accused of many things: drinking on campus, being a gang member, being racist, pulling firearms. One of my school periods was the principal's office. Always had campus security near me and keeping an eye on me. And Santa Cruz County sheriffs, I think we were the first class that had sheriffs on campus. They would try to hold private, they would try to call my parents, have me go down to their office. And, hello? So they would set up all these meetings, and they would try to get me go down there to have these meetings with the Santa Cruz County sheriffs, and they were just pulling fast ones on me and my family, thinking that we didn't know how to defend ourselves. And luckily, we had lawyers and community members, parents from the school that would support us and everything. And we fought back. We organized. So some of the achievements after we dealt with the racism and some of the principals' shenanigans, some of the struggles and achievements that we were able to achieve at Aptos High School was the Chicano studies. We did walkouts, we did school board meetings, and eventually within a year, we got Chicano studies at Aptos High School. We also brought MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanos de Aztlán, to Aptos High School, an all-white school. That was a big victory for us to have that on campus. We worked along with the Brown Berets, also a Brown Beret myself. They helped us with a lot of the struggles that we faced. We had a lot of peace and unity events to promote unity with all students and gangs on campus. Fought against the segregation of the district that would send all Watsonville students back home. That was a big, big movement that the parents wanted. They wanted to segregate the district, and from some of the maps that they had, it was a no-brainer that they were being racist. They were going to send all the Watsonville students back to Watsonville and get their school back according to their maps. So right here, consultant hired to end conflict at Aptos High School. But if you look right there, protest takes demand to the board. Students not asking for Chicano studies. We demanded it. So all this was well documented in the newspaper. Again, here's the principal that accused me. There's me with some of the students. Students pressure administration for new course in Chicano studies. Barrios Unidos, again, Chicano Club Empowerment, Chicano Club Mecha that we had on campus. Barrios Unidos was on campus promoting peace and unity. Here's a map of the segregation of the districts that they wanted to do. If you look over here, this first map, the lighter gray part area, that would be the Aptos district. And then in the second one, you could tell all those darker area on the bottom was all the schools in Pajaro Valley that still exist. You know, and let me point out, if you guys look on that last article over there, right there where it says to create two districts of equal size doesn't make a lot of sense because it ignores the fact that all Aptos is a geographical separate community. Trustee Doug Kaplan. So Doug Kaplan's been doing this for a long time, and we're still dealing with him. You know, and ever since I joined the movement with the Ethnic Studies Freedom Schools, he has reached out to me several times. He wants to sit down and talk to me and try to clear up whatever thoughts or ideas I might have about him, and I'm willing to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring all these newspaper clippings in and tell him, explain yourself. I have nothing to say. What do you want to talk about? You know? So we pushed for a multicultural mural by Guillermo Aranda. We were not successful with that mural, but that mural was going to promote unity, multicultural on campus. And 28 years later, the students and teachers are still fighting to have that mural done at Aptos. I just talked to Guillermo about a week ago, and he says they're still trying to get that mural done at Aptos. And for some reason, they still keep on denying it. Every other school in the district has murals by Guillermo Aranda. Guillermo Aranda is a famous artist. He's got murals at Chicano Park and all through California. So does racism still exist? Yes. So here's some of the murals that Guillermo has done in the past. That's Guillermo over there. Even after I finished at Aptos, I was later accused of being in a attempted murder case, stabbing, which I was never proven guilty. I went through the whole court system. One thing that I can say is Bobby and my mentor, Alan Suweli, would come and visit me in jail. And that meant a lot to have these mentors that I had at school come visit me in jail. But this was blasted in the newspapers, leader or loser. And you could tell they would take up a lot of real estate in the newspapers to make me look like this person I was not. And when they found out that I was not guilty, it took 2 sentences to just say found innocent, you know? So because of the attempted murder and all these accusations, I went into a depression. I struggled with addiction, fell off for a lot of years, you know. It was part of my journey, you know. And it's the truth, and I'm not afraid to talk about it because I had to go through that journey to be where I'm at today. So after high school, I did a documentary film on drugs, teen pregnancy, gang violence, and my son's birth was in that film. I met my wife. I was 17 years old. I got married. It was about teen pregnancy. She gets pregnant during the filming, so my son's pregnancy was on the film, right? And I was a big-time Richie Valens fan before I met her. He was my idol. And after I married her, took her to my house one day. I had a Richie Valens poster on my wall, and it was autographed by Donna. And she seen it. She started laughing. She says, "Who's Donna?" I go, "Hey, you better show some respect for Richie Valens and Donna." She goes, "You know what? Do you know who my dad is?" Bob is my dad. Richie Valence is my uncle. So I ended up marrying her, and here she is. There's Bob and the Richie Valence family. Um, and the reason I put this on here was because when I went to go tell her family that she was pregnant, because that's the custom that you do is you go tell. We went to my parents to tell her she's pregnant. We had dinner, whatever, got that through. But when I went to go tell her parents, her mom kept on asking me, "I know you from somewhere. I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you from?" I go, "I don't know. I don't know where you know me from, you know." And we're sitting there having dinner, and I'm about to tell her dad, "Hey, your daughter's pregnant from me." When she jumps up, she goes, "Oh my God, I know where I know you from." She went into her room. Scrapbook like this. She goes, "You're that boy from Aptos High School. I've been following your story all these years. You know, I know you from there. You know." So, how crazy is that? She's the whitest lady too. She was white, but she was down for the movement. You know, and um, over the years went by. I kind of fell off, and I didn't stick with the movement and all that. And I just recently got clean. I got a year clean, and I remember going to this church one day, and I'm standing at the church. I had gotten in a fight with my dad, and I'm looking at the bulletin board and the youth programs they had, and this guy comes up to me, goes, "Today's a good day to do something good," and he had a notebook, and it said that in big gold letters. I go, "Yes, it is. Today is a good day." He's like, "I see that you're looking at the youth program." I go, "Yes. Are you interested in working with the youth?" I said, "I'm very interested to work with the youth." Well, let me tell you a story, and this is 20 something years later. Let me tell you a story about this guy. His name's Omar, you know, and he was a leader and blah, blah, blah. He used to get up. I'm listening to him and I'm trying to hold back the tears, all right? He goes, "I believe that you could be a leader like he was." Yeah, I said, "Yeah." He goes, "We're going to do big things. We're gonna make changes. We're going to work with the youth." I said, "Yeah." I never told him who I was. And I went to the bathroom right after we had the conversation. I just bawled, all right? And I'm walking home back from Aptos, and he picks me up. And he's like, "Where are you going?" "Back to Watsonville." He goes, "I'll give you a ride. Get in." So I get in, and he starts telling me again, "You're going to be a leader like that guy, Omar." So he pulls up at my house, and I pull out my wallet, and I go, "You know that guy you're talking about? That's me." "No, no, you're going to be a leader like him." I go, "No, that's me that you're talking about." And I show him my ID. And he goes, "No way. Oh my God." He starts to cry too. He goes, "Can I show you something? I want to bring something from my house." He went and got paper that he did. He went to UC Berkeley. He's, "Oh, I graduated Berkeley because I wrote a paper on you. And I want you to have it." And I don't tell these stories to toot my own horn. I tell these stories because those kind of moments uh, inspire me to do the thing and the work that I do today, work with the youth. Uh, so my mission is to inspire the youth and to awaken the warrior in them. I believe in you. You are a leader. Now lead. Tell me I can't. I'll show you I can. Sí se puede. Que viva el movimiento.
Okay, we are over time and lunch is ready. And I know that you probably have questions and you've been holding them. But I think more than anything, just thank you so much to everyone here. Omar, my goodness, thank you for your incredible courage and, your candor. There's so much courage in that. Um, Thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing in a place where, you know what, it's just not easy to do. And we want to work together to create an education that serves our communities. And this is a starting point, one of many. And we look forward to working with you. And this includes everyone in the audience. We are going to be reaching out to you. We're going to ask you to organize with us, and let's create the education that the students here deserve and that will transform this local area. And yeah, just finally, just thank you everyone again for joining us for 3 incredible days of the Summer Institute. It's been so incredibly moving. The Three Musketeers started us out, and then Alfonso came from Coachella to share with us a blueprint for what we might do. And then different members of Paro Valley for Ethnic Studies and Justice and other allied organizations presented on the struggle. And we're closing out with organizers who've been doing this work in some cases for many decades. And yeah, just thank you all so very much. Thank you for keeping this movement fiery and alive. Yeah.